For over 400 years, the buildings of Newfoundland and the people who created them have stayed hard by the sea. Today, with change taking place faster than ever before, we can see science and technology combine with the artistry and craftsmanship of the past to bring about changes for the better. Changes then. This is the history of our architecture, where we live and play, work and pray. It is our story. At first, there wasn't much to work with except wood, so the first real structures were made from local timber, with only the skills of fishermen to put them together. The result is the Newfoundland tilt. Tilts like this one in Loxton Path Park are temporary dwellings, and are probably the oldest built by new arrivals in North America. The roofs were caulked with moss to keep the winds from blowing between the timbers. These first tilts were made by crews who stayed ashore in cruel winter weather to make preparations for the other fishermen's arrival. So the tilts needed heat. But the ventilation was so bad that the tilts often reeked of smoke, and the chimneys were so makeshift that they frequently became part of the fire. Smoking like a tilt is a saying we still use today. The logs are vertical, not horizontal. A primitive and simple way to build, and quite different from the traditional log cabin. Our beginnings were close to the sea, and here in the primitive architecture of Newfoundland, we find unique proof. This kind of structure from the early 1800s was designed to fill a need. Such design today would be referred to as functional architecture. Our early villages were the first permanent ones because they were the first legal ones. Until then, British merchants had opposed the establishment of any settlements on the island. They grew close to the fishing grounds, regardless of how rocky the shoreline. The fishermen themselves were the architects. They designed these stages and flakes, as well as the homes for their families. They were built close to the water so that other members of the family could help land the fish. Visitors to such villages as Hibbs Cove can see these flakes still in use. Many of the early 19th century settlers were Irish, and they brought with them the craft of building with stone. So too they brought the tradition of the inglenook. This is a sit-in stone fireplace, sometimes as large as 12 feet across, with a bench on either side for the entire family to huddle around when the icy Atlantic gales blew. A wooden dwelling was built around this stone fireplace. Still, all that remains today is the inglenook, like this one in historic Harbour Grace. Here's another distinctive Newfoundland shape, the salt box. Little homes like this can be seen dotted along the coastline. They are examples of medieval shelter, the style having been brought over in the 17th century. You can spot the steep pitch of the roof joining the gentler slope of an extension. This is called the linhay, and it was added later to house the animals. The warmth of the animals helped to heat the house in the winter months. Salt boxes are rarely found elsewhere in Canada, but although over 100 years old, there are still many in Newfoundland. Their design is simple, severe, and practical. The lady on the roof gives us a clue to the name of the balustraded roof deck, the Widow's Walk. It sits on top of a hip roof and would be called a captain's walk wherever else it is found. But in Newfoundland, the sea, cruel and sudden, took a heavy toll of lives. In Grand Bank on the Burin Peninsula, You can stand scanning the ocean for homecoming ships from this Widow's Walk. For some, the dangers of an angry ocean were offset by the rewards. The harvest of fish, whales, and seals was great, and some men lived long and well. These men were the captains. They had challenged the sea and won. Their houses, many known by the names of the owners, reflected their position in the local community. The addition of some gingerbread indicates status on its own. In 1892, the last of several great fires ravaged St. John's. 2/3 of the city was destroyed and 11,000 people were made homeless. Hillside Row housing like this resulted because of the great need created by this disaster. This is what gives old St. John's much of its character today. The architectural styles vary from row to row, but the basics are common to all. Wooden homes in a row, each using a minimum of land, a minimum of wood, 3 stories high, with plain and simple facades. The outports. They started to grow when the sea was the only highway. With the 1900s came a sudden change in style, as though the 20th century had reached out and announced itself. The salt box began to disappear, and the new influence of the architecture of St. John's started to make itself felt. These single dwellings have relatively flat roofs, quite different from the steeply angled roofs of the salt boxes. They are 2-storied homes with more room for growing families, for this is an environment where children can grow up strong and healthy, close to nature. While these simple styles of homes were most common, a few of the wealthier merchants were responding to other influences. They wanted more room, and they wanted style. This home, built originally as a duplex, is a typical turn-of-the-century Victorian one in size and ornamentation. It stands today, much as when it was built, on Kingsbridge Road in the capital. The detail and charm of Victorian architecture remains today in many of the fine old homes of St. John's. The Queen Anne style was another chosen by the wealthy merchants who rebuilt after the Great Fire. This curved linear architecture emphasized the considerable size of each house. Huge Queen Anne-style bay windows were integrated into the building as part of the design. This is Winter Home House on Rennie's Mill Road in St. John's. This gatehouse, although small for the style, is indeed Gothic in design. Imaginatively, wood has been used to simulate stone because of its availability. Yet the architecture remains true to style. The highly decorated Gothic windows, which are characteristic, are carried through to another almost identical building, the Government House Gatehouse, also in St. John's. Just west of Cove Road in St. John's stands this typical Scottish dwelling. These 5-sided dormer windows are rarely found elsewhere in Canada. Looking at these battle dormers, you might imagine yourself to be in a part of Scotland. Similarly, the French have left a clear and distinctive mark, primarily through the architecture of Francois Mansart. The Mansart roof can be seen from Placentia to St. John's and is characterized by short, steeply curved sides. The top was originally sloped, but in Newfoundland it is often flat. In 1858, the building firm of Southcote introduced this roof into our architecture, and gradually the style developed. It also included side entrances, dormers and ground-level bay windows. Such style and taste transformed builder Southcote rapidly into architect Southcote. Among the many houses that Southcote was commissioned to build was one for the Rothwell sisters. After long sisterly discussions, they still couldn't seem to reach agreement on how the home should look. One sister preferred Gothic. The other preferred Southcote's own distinctive style. In the end, the firm of Southcote came up with an ingenious solution that combined both designs. Each sister got her own way. Newfoundland inherited a building with one style on each end. One of the many reasons why today Southcote is the strongest influence of any individual on Newfoundland architecture. Today in Newton, a charming little village just north of Wesleyville, you can see another oddity of Newfoundland architecture in this quaint double dwelling. But you have to go inside to see it. Built by the two Barber brothers, the house has no interior partition, since they were the same family after all. So we have two houses, two staircases, but no dividing wall. The brothers agreed that the arrangement would work out just fine, as long as the women were getting along. For the 100th anniversary of this house, the Barber family planned to give the old place some electricity. Although stone is a common enough material in the province, few old houses were built of it. The primary reason was lack of masons. With their arrival from Ireland, however, houses began to spring up and are still standing today. The Munn property survived the Great Fire because of its stone walls and slate roof. The interior of the house has also been well kept in its original state. The floorboards, made of pine and very wide, lie as solid today as they did when the house was first built at the turn of the century. Although plastered over in many places, this stone building still demonstrates the skill of the early masons, particularly around the roof and the windows. Its style is Dutch colonial, and it stands proudly on Canaz Hill. Most of the stone used in its construction came from an old French fortress long destroyed. Here is another example of the early mason work. This fine stone barn which stands in picturesque Brigus, home of the famous Captain Bob Bartlett. Just how well stone stood up against wind and rain, fire and man-made damage is demonstrated by the old courthouse and jail in Harbour Grace. It was built in 1831. An example of the work of Patrick Keogh, an early master builder in stone, it stands strong and solid. The courthouse is still in use. The stone jail, quite active until recent years, looks as though it could still be of service if needed. The cells have been kept in good repair, and much of the original hardware is still in place. The barred door still closes with as much finality as it ever did. The building is a complete architectural unit since the exercise yard wall is an integral part of the design. This is the former site of the fort of the pirate Admiral Peter Easton, the notorious Blackbeard. The custom house, now used as a museum in Harbour Grace, has been faithfully restored in great detail. The building has a saddle roof and beautifully worked trim around the windows and the doors. The churches of Newfoundland would do justice to much larger cities and more affluent people anywhere in the New World. Having been built and maintained through good times and bad, they stand today as tremendous acts of faith for both the clergy and the people of our province. This is a famous Newfoundland landmark, the church by the side of the road. Built in 1871, it overlooks Conception Bay at Topsail. Since then, it has been battered by storms and gales. But although teetering, shaky, and perhaps too small, its popularity has already decreed that there will always be a church by the side of the road. Woven through our past were constant wars and struggles for power. So it is not surprising that St. Thomas, as a garrison church, is the oldest in the province. The style is Gothic. It was once a much smaller church than it is today. The great windstorm of 1846 shifted it from its foundations. Stabilizing wings were added, and with them came extra width. The church was also lengthened to give it extra room, and stands as we see it today. Behind the church is St. Thomas Rectory, a fine example of American colonial style. Built in 1801 as a quartermaster's house, it was taken over in 1870 by the church. The provincial government is speeding restoration. As the outside is being carefully returned to its original state, so are the furnishings being sought in Europe. Soon we will be able to enjoy the building exactly as it was. The Basilica of St. John the Baptist is situated on the highest point of the ridge surrounded by the city of St. John's. The stone for the cathedral was brought from Kelly's Island in Conception Bay, and the building was completed in 1850. Today, it is still one of the finest examples of Romanesque architecture in North America. The interior of the basilica is equally impressive. From floor to ceiling, there abounds a wealth of breathtaking decoration. Situated under the main altar is the magnificent statue by Hogan, Redeemer in Death. Locally, we call it the Dead Christ. The only other like it is in Ireland, the birthplace of so many of the stonemasons who built the cathedral. The St. John arch and statue were first erected in 1857, when the arch had a single span. Later, the arch was moved and rebuilt with a triple span. The clock is over 7 feet in diameter and was once illuminated by gas jets. In front of the basilica, other examples of statues in stone stand watch over the cathedral square. The next building in the square is the Presentation Convent, and inside can be seen one of the most breathtaking works of art in the world. Each year, hundreds of visitors gaze in awe and admiration at the Veiled Virgin by Giovanni Strasso. The sculptor has given the illusion of looking through a veil, although the bust is delicately hewn from a solid block of marble. It has often been said of the Anglican Cathedral in St. John's that it is one of the finest examples of Gothic architecture to be seen either in Canada or the United States. It was designed by Sir George Gilbert Scott, whose son both designed much of the interior and supervised restoration after the fire of 1892. Thus, the exterior of the cathedral matches the inside in the intricacy of its pointed Gothic detail and its carvings. Typical of the style is the variety in the stonework. The original limestone came from England, used as ballast in westbound ships. But following the Great Fire, much of the mortar and stone was damaged, and repairs have carried on continuously ever since. You can imagine the ultimate beauty of the church by comparing the difference that restoration makes. The interior of the Anglican Cathedral is beautifully elaborate. The sculpture is perhaps the outstanding feature of the interior. No two carvings are the same, and we see just how true this is when we compare each arch, pillar, and piece of fine stonework. Magnificent stained glass windows, typical of the work of their designers Kemp and Jones, cast a soft golden green light. The cathedral abounds with works of art to delight the eye. There are some beautiful examples of statuary in the chancel area. Each block of stone in the altar was shipped from England for assembly. And uniquely, the lectern is chiseled from solid oak in the form of an eagle. Gower Street United Church dates from 1856. It has a brick exterior, and its style is actually a mixture of Gothic and Romanesque. Assorted towers and turrets give it a structurally massive appearance. Inside, the church is as solid as a rock, displaying no hint that the once proud steeple has been removed. Behind the minister stands the choir galleries and a mighty pipe organ. Where the congregation sits, there are two semicircular galleries. One on a level with the pulpit, and the second near the apex of the ceiling. When the minister delivers his sermon, he does so directly at the congregation. Eye to eye, you might say. Cochrane United is also an architecturally intriguing church. Its style borrows from both early Christian and Byzantine. Both of these styles were developed in sunny climates, and Cochrane looks at its best when the sun is shining upon it. The church has a magnificent view overlooking the entrance to St. John's Harbour. Like so many religious landmarks in our province, it seems to beckon the weary sailor home again. St. Paul's Church in Harbour Grace was the first stone church built in Newfoundland. It dates back to 1835. Inside the church, supporting the roof, are the original free-span trestles. The same pine pews are still in use, although the wooden backstabbers that were fixed to the back of the seats to keep the congregation awake during the sermon have been dispensed with. Built to prevent the male members of the congregation sneaking a peek at the ladies' ankles, these chastity boards are now just another reminder of bygone days. This Moravian mission represents the oldest Protestant religion in the world. These structures, with huge sloping roofs, strongly reflect the German architecture of the 18th century. Built at Hopedale on the coast of Labrador, The oldest of these buildings dates back to 1782. The style of building was first established when the earliest mission building was brought over in its entirety from Europe. The stark design is carried with great severity into the spotlessly clean interiors of these missions. Even the altar consists of a little cloth-covered table. The warmth of the congregation is captured in their love of music. Instruments lie as if waiting to lead the congregation in solemn song. Waiting too are the organ keys. For some long-forgotten reason, their black and white colors reversed. The coves and rocky coastline where it all began, where the first daring fishermen sought shelter from the elements, through the slow, painstaking struggle to change bad laws, build useful skills, and shape the materials of our province to the booming growth of today.